Welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a podcast where we discuss some grand topics that we think affect our lives.
Large scale, over the top subject lines and small scale opinions.
My name's Ivanka Magic.
And my name is Michael Forrest. This week we're going to talk about morality, probably in secular terms largely, so don't get too excited. Things like the disappearance of religion from our lives and the sort of space that's left. People doing things without, recourse to morality, which we touched on last week.
I've got things like absolute versus relative morality, ethics, professional and otherwise. What's the difference between ethics and morals?
And some stuff about how our DNA programs us toward moral behaviour in ways that we might not realise.
Blimey.
But before we get into any of that rubbish, how's your week, Ivanka? What have you been doing?
This week, we launched the Brighton Restaurant Awards. Vote online.
Bravo.
The winners, the Bravo winners were announced. So
it was the winners.
It was the winners.
You were just announcing the competition or something.
No. The competition's been running for ages. Since the end of 31st of January, in fact, people have been voting. 27,082 votes we got.
Jesus, that's everyone in Brighton.
That is everyone in Brighton. And so...
What is the population of Brighton?
About 270-something thousand.
Okay,
280,000, that kind of thing.
Pretty good.
Pretty good levels of engagement there. Very good stats on the website on Wednesday. I got to enjoy that thing, which I haven't enjoyed since Ubuntu, where you launch something live and the real-time Google visitor numbers just go up and up and up. Oh, it's so exciting. And the website did not go down and down and down, which is the critical success. So yes,
congratulations!
Thank you very much.
Getting that live.
Yeah. And we enjoyed that. And obviously, congratulations to all the winners. But
so next time I'm in Brighton, I go on to restaurants, brighton.co.uk, I see who's the winner and go there for lunch.
Yeah.
And or dinner, unless there's
or
a
snacks,
huge waiting list.
Or coffee, or we've got loads of categories.
Excellent.
So yes, there you go. That's mostly been this week. What about your week, Michael? Are you well?
I'm feeling pretty well. Sickly Michael, who seems to be a distant. Well, I've had this chest thing where, like, it hurts. It's like stopped me sneezing. It like really hurt. Like the pain of this little pain in my chest stopped me. Cancelled a sneeze.
Is this something to do with your personal trainer and his?
This is personal trainer
thing?
Trying to give me breasts of some sort. I managed to do a successful sneeze yesterday by just bracing myself.
Oh dear.
And that worked, but then I sort of forgot to cover my mouth and it was at work, so I was like, oh no, yeah, I've also got to still do the normal social things that one must do when sneezing. But usually I do 3 sneezes in a row, so I mean it turns out that's optional if pain might happen. So.
That's fascinating.
Otherwise, I've been reading a book on how to write. It's called The Anatomy of Story, and I've been sort of trying to go through that and see if I can get one of my little script ideas off the ground, or just trying to get the hang of writing. I thought maybe I'll write short stories or narratives or something. And I met our mutual friend Charlene last week, and she suggested perhaps even just writing with pen and paper, and I was like, well, I mean, that's silly. And then I got myself a nice pen and pad and paper, and I've been writing my my ideas down on there and considering them a little more, I think, than if I was writing them on the computer. Because actually I find writing, I prefer... I really enjoyed writing on an iPad because there's no distractions and it's just one screen. When I'm writing lyrics, I've got this external keyboard, so I stick even just an iPhone in there. I've got this iPhone 4 that I just stick in there and just write lyrics in the Notes app on there. I'm quite pleased with my first story premise, and I'm just trying to write big lists of things that I have collected over the years that I would like to see on screen one day.
Blimey.
And went with work, played pool last night with work, which they're a nice bunch, I think. No one was very good at pool.
Are you any good at pool?
I mean, I should be, but I don't know what it is. sometimes I can pull something off, but most of the time I'm either too sort of impatient or I sort of value the style over the substance a bit sometimes, but then if you just miss, there's no style or substance, is there?
No, it's pretty lame actually.
I think after last week, my singularity theory, it was good to sort of say that out loud on a recording, but then immediately afterwards I was like, okay, right, here are the problems with that idea. Because obviously the state, people have always exploited things faster than like the law can catch up. Otherwise, how do you come up with the laws? But I think it was more to do with predictions and how we have just reached a point where we can't seem to make predictions about anything anymore. And that's kind of the crux of the singularity thing. And the fact that that's kind of happening on a social level rather than a what kind of devices will we be using level. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I think there's some pretty fascinating things going on at the moment. It's interesting you said law then, because I had law down as one of my topics that I forgot to mention in our summary at the beginning, because law's obviously, well, I think it's relevant when talking about morals. But like I was reading, so one of my new tactics for dealing with unsolicited at Ivanka tweets is to respond with, "Hi, I'm a different Ivanka. Here's my podcast."
Nice.
One woman responded yesterday by going, "I don't know you." and I don't know how to respond to that. Thank you. But anyway, but what it's meant that then there's another woman on the internet called Lauren Ingram, I believe, and she has a very similar name to a woman called Laura Ingram, who is a Fox News anchor. She gets a load of abuse, obviously. But I ran down this, or I clicked down a rabbit hole this morning, which allowed me to discover that, and this is relevant on not being able to predict. So a Parkland student gets ridiculed by a Fox News anchor. He tweets, "And who are your sponsors?" asking for a friend. The result is that loads and loads of sponsors, big name sponsors, start dropping her Fox News show.
Oh.
And he's got now 600,000 followers on Twitter and blah blah, and all this happens in a matter of a few days with just some smart online from a 16-year-old 17-year-old who's just survived a tragic event, and having everybody rally to beat up on an adult who just should know better.
Yes.
So that, I mean, you couldn't predict shit like that, could you?
No, and it's the other point. Yeah, I just think like the signal to noise ratio is. I've always been a believer in sort of overall trends kind of being more significant, but it's like the noise now is so amplified, and that's kind of sort of what you're talking. Just one person saying something can just kind of have a huge impact. The random stuff is now like it's just getting more and more kind of dense with random stuff, and which doesn't really leave much space for the sort of overall trends anymore.
No. So this thing where with the signal, so one of the problems with the existence of online in this kind of Twitter, Facebook, people saying random things and it going crazy, is that it can take away your day, your week, the randomness of it. It's like, people sending email, they expect immediate responses, and that's not fair. My day was not planned around responding to your really long email, Stuart. Though I did respond with that. I will read it carefully, but I haven't had time yet. It's not on my to-do list yet.
Well, I thought we could sort of have a little read of it and redress it and use that or not.
We've got Stuart and Warren. Warren's sent us a conundrum on Twitter, but I haven't finished my randomness point. But anyway, maybe I have, which is that if you are Laura Ingram or whatever her name is, the Fox News anchor one, not the good one, and you've got strategy and a plan for how you're going to become even more famous and earn even more money, and boom, you say something frankly offensive, rude, and something you should know better than to say or even think, which was having a pop at anyway. Then everything goes off piece, just like that. You've got suddenly your plan's not a plan anymore, and it's because the volume that can jump onto the noise is massive.
Yeah, like people just kind of like latch onto the shiny.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah, so
and sometimes that's not fair either.
no,
But,
sometimes
you
it's
know,
not fair. In this instance, I think it's fair.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's down. That brings us back to the morality question. You know, who?
Hey, listen, I'm just looking at Warren's question, and I have a very good response to it, a little regret. So Warren says, had a question after listening to your malevolent use of data chat and being selective about projects you work on. If a good egg is presented with an opportunity to work on dark tech, should they get involved in a bid to skew it towards better use? And I don't know if you remember last January, I got this call from this recruiter saying, like, the Leave campaign is looking for data people. And my immediate response was, that is outrageous and shocking, and I can't believe it. And, like, said, absolutely under no circumstances would I ever get involved with that, and you should be ashamed of yourself for working for them. And I can't really believe it. And I sort of went straight and found the Remain people and sort of wrote them a letter saying, look, the Leave campaign is making an app or something. Like, they're still working hard, even though they. So that kind of galvanised me there. But I thought if I'd been smarter, I should have probably. Maybe I could have kind of gone into the inside and sort of done a bit of journalism from that sort of privileged position of being able to kind of go in as a tech person into this dark thing and perhaps sort of spin it a different way. Or not even, maybe just come for a few days and just find out what they're up to and then report on that. And I kind of think I missed a trick there, because I could have done it.
I don't know. I can understand the temptation, but this is all about ends justifying means. And also I've got a very, very Borat sounding poor translation from a Herzegovinian phrase, or possibly even something that my father invented. But it's basically, if you roll in shit, the pigs will eat you. So getting stuck into the topic a little bit.
Let's do it. Get stuck in.
In preparation for this week's topic, I'm fortunate that I have access to somebody that allowed me to cheat on my research a little bit, because my sister has a degree in philosophy and her dissertation was on relative versus absolute morality versus rational or relative morality. So, for example, we've discussed this previously, like murder is always wrong. There is no circumstance. That's one of the principles that I believe in, and I can argue that rationally in terms of once you've killed somebody, it's done. There's no going back. If in regards to capital punishment, I might kill the wrong person. I'm also punishing that person's whole family who are losing a loved one potentially. It may actually not be punishment to the person who's being capitally punished, because it's over.
It's just a way out.
Yeah. So there's a kind of I can back up part of my argument with a sort of rational, something that is kind of more factual, and sort of there's something about relative morality which argues about the fact that what is morally right and wrong in one country might not be in a different one. So, for example, gay marriage is an example of something that is potentially debatable and affected by religion and that kind of stuff. Or, some places might allow guns, others don't. Some people might allow multiple wives, some don't, blah, blah, blah. But
do we not see that as... do we not see that as social progress, though, and that the people who think that homosexuality is amoral and the people that think women aren't people, aren't they just behind the curve?
I think I don't know. I think that the progress argument, I would agree with you, but we broadly agree on things like this. Otherwise, I don't think we could be friends.
Well, yeah, I mean...
I think if you fundamentally... Have I told you the story of somebody... I'm sure I did, of somebody I was friends with at my master's, until she said something pro-Iraq war, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realise that our values were so grossly different that I couldn't talk to you anymore. But then...
So it's Michael and Ivanka's Morality Bubble podcast.
Well, maybe. I think there's some things we don't agree, and I think some things are harder to have a principled position on, like the idea of going to work on a project that might be inherently evil in order to sway it or learn from it or try and, I don't know, take that technology and apply it in a positive way. Because we've also talked, I mean, even last week when we were talking about the Cambridge Analytica story, the answer to Cambridge Analytica isn't necessarily don't collect data on people, because data's useful in lots of different circumstances.
No,
but it's just how and what it's used for. So what is somebody's evil? Where does my evil start and somebody else's evil start? Or my wrong start and somebody else's wrong start? And is there a position? So philosophers have debated this for thousands of years, defining what's right and wrong.
Names that I'm glad we're not dropping, because it makes it very boring when you start kind of talking about specific philosophers. But
and I don't know enough to start citing specific philosophers. But my point is that when you having the conversation about whether something is right or wrong is very it's not easy. One of the reasons why you can pull in God every so often is go, well, there's the 10 Commandments. It is always wrong to cheat on your wife or steal or kill or whatever it is, except if. It's like, do not kill except if you're in a war. And then I don't know
well, the do not kill is just becomes, it's the circle of empathy problem is why you're still allowed to kill people that aren't humans. That's why that's.
Yeah, so we discussed that in
If
violence,
you could just expand your sphere to everyone, then do not kill would be absolute. But because your perception of different spheres of humanity or subhumanity is subjective, then your ideas about what you're allowed to do becomes subjective.
Which
I'd maybe like, I do object to the any absolute argument, but what I would say that I think probably gets us to a similar place is that we do have like an intrinsic morality programmed into us that I think is universal, and it's possible. So and that's a genetically. Where our behavior is modulated by emotions, which are our genes' ways of of programming us, essentially, of like controlling our behavior a little bit, in order to kind of take us from just kind of doing a short-termist, hit someone over the head and not worry about whether actually it might have been better to make friends with them. Our genes can help us play a bit of a longer game by programming in these sort of moral constructs and moral reactions. But it's not like an exact thing. And in some people, I do think that most people do know the difference between right and wrong intrinsically, because doing the wrong thing makes them feel bad. And like, not everyone can be Tony Soprano. Right? Not everyone can be evil, because we just, on the whole, have this thing inside us that's helping us do the right thing. And my point being, and that's where I would point, if I was to say there was an absolute thing, I would say that in terms of our long-term survival, we are given these social strategies and behaviors by our emotions, and that's what we think of as morality.
So that, I mean, you presented this argument, I think, when we were talking about violence, which is that whole, biologically programmed to collaborate versus, or cooperate versus fight.
Yeah.
So it's only worth biffing somebody over the head and nicking their wallet if you're never going to see them again. Which is, and the idea that we are genetically programmed. So I mean, you see this in small children. They do something wrong. As soon as they've done it, they know they've done something wrong, and then they start crying because they feel bad. It's like, oh, shit. And it's not because they're trying to deflect. It's because they don't know how to deal with the fact that they feel bad. Because they've just smacked their mother in the face, which happened to me. But so the morality question is always going to be, and there is a bit of objective and subjective. There's not a bit, there's loads. I mean, but the thing is that possibly we're missing with some of these things, like the conversations about Cambridge Analytica dudes and that kind of thing, is the motivations and goals. So even if, like, it's this question of to what end, because one of the things I have been reading about this week to try and look at the morality question is there's a few conversations about whether there should be a manifesto, a code of ethics, a sort of Hippocratic oath type thing for technology, for technologists, so that they, a kind of first do no harm type thing, or that might help us think about the general betterment of society and using technology instead of just using it, doing more of this because we can business. So, if your overall motivation is to make sure, and I found some quite interesting the obligation of the engineer. It says, I am an engineer. In my profession, I take deep pride. To it, I owe solemn obligations. Since the Stone Age, human progress has been spurred by the engineering genius. Engineers have made usable nature's vast resources of materials and energy for humanity's benefit. Engineers have vitalised and turned to practical use the principles of science and the means of technology. Were it not for this heritage of accumulated experiences, my efforts would be feeble. As an engineer, I pledge to practice integrity and fair dealing, tolerance and respect, and to uphold devotion to the standards and dignity of my profession, conscious always that my skill carries with it the obligation to serve humanity by making best use of her Earth's precious wealth. As an engineer, I shall participate in none but honest enterprises. When needed, my skill and knowledge shall be given without reservation for the public good. In the performance of duty and in fidelity to my profession, I shall give the utmost. Which I thought was quite a...
What was that again?
The engineer's... the obligation of the engineer. It's the United States Order of the Engineer, a fellowship of engineers who must be a certified professional engineer or graduated from an accredited engineering programme.
So
you
you
sort
have
of
this
buy
oath.
into it. And I found it... I stumbled across it because Dot Everyone, I don't know if you know... If you heard of them, they're like Martha Lane Fox's latest initiative. They've done quite a bit of research, and there's a few blog posts about the ethics, whether or not there are manifestos that should be in place, that kind of thing. So they give a few examples, which is, there's one from the ACM, which is I think they're international, the Association for Computing Machineries Committee. So there's those kind of, and the IE do one, or IET, or whatever they're called these days. So there are some efforts to sort of be
I think that'd be a good job website, wouldn't it? Like, here are all the certified responsible, socially conscious job search.
Yeah. and I think in this world of what's, they look about the public good, those kind of words are used, or using the earth's precious wealth, blah blah blah. These are all sort of very nice sentiments, but I don't know how many of them how does Cambridge Analytica come to be in a world where everyone has signed up to a Hippocratic oath of engineeringness?
Yeah, but like not everyone would sign up.
No.
I mean, you can still do this stuff. Like, you don't have to have a license to get a computer and write some software. Like, there's no. I mean, I don't think you should have to. I think that would be a fucked up idea. People have to be either given permission to not feel bad about something that they, in their heart, know that they probably should feel bad about.
Well,
but also, if you don't, I think Cambridge Analytica operates because they just don't see people as people. They see people as, that's what we talked about last week. They just don't have empathy for the people. And morality doesn't mean anything. I mean, and you may argue with me being from Brighton, most people wouldn't apply morality to a rock or to cosmic rays or to things that don't possess consciousness and emotions. And if people do want to apply morality to those things, they tend to imbue that tree with some sort of emotional response, or in order to be able to do that. So morality applies to other thinking, conscious, empathic agents, but it all goes in the toilet if you don't see that other person as having those facilities. And then with psychopaths, which is what I think Alexander Nix is, they don't really have empathy for anyone.
No.
And that just lets them do whatever they want. And that's why they get into power, and that's why they can... Although, if we say that that there is there's an evolutionary benefit to cooperation, but if everyone's cooperating, that leaves it open to exploitation by one negative agent. But if everyone started behaving like a psychopath, society wouldn't last much longer, and actually cooperating people would start to flourish. And you see this in sort of game theory simulations.
So I get the point that if you don't see people as people, then therefore morality doesn't apply. But on the subject of rocks and stones and trees and things, what about littering? So, that's wrong.
Yeah, but it's not because the pavement's going to get upset. It's because the people walking along the pavement are going to get upset. There's no intrinsic... The Earth doesn't give a shit. The Earth is just the Earth. It's us that we care about.
Yeah. Okay. I was just thinking about how that's the example that came to mind, because my child has accepted that throwing things on the floor is wrong. Something fell out of my pocket the other day, and she went, "Mummy, what have you done?" I was like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I won't do it ever again."
There's this bridge. So where I live, there's one way across the canal for 5 minutes either way. There's this one bridge, and I cannot understand why people let their dogs shit on it and puke on it. I mean, just go a little bit further, because it's this really narrow little bridge. I just cannot understand what's going on there. Puke over the edge of the rail into the water.
Quite hard to get a dog to do anything like that.
Well, no, I don't know. I mean, just don't
people
stop on the bridge. I don't know. And then people just puking on this bridge. Can you just... There's water right there. This isn't something that I was necessarily thinking about, but of intoxication, people seem to think that they can just... I was drunk, therefore normal standards of morality don't apply to me. Any drug you take, you're still you. I don't care how drunk you are, you're still you. It's either just bringing something to the surface that's still in there, that was in there all the time, but just suppressed. But it's not a different person, it's still, so please, I don't care if you were drunk, it doesn't excuse it. For example, what do you think about that?
I agree. I don't have a counterpoint. I don't have anything to add.
Well, never mind then.
So being drunk...
Boring.
I agree.
That was boring.
If we're relying on people feeling bad to check their behaviour, that's an important part of the information you're presenting.
And also feeling good for doing good things as well. And also that's kind of looked down on a bit as well, but come on, you're allowed to feel good for being having a little halo on your head to do something good.
Well, it's also very clear that one of the reasons people contribute to charities and give money to homeless people is not really to help the homeless person, it's because it makes you feel better that you've helped somebody. It's a nice thing to do. It creates a nice feeling.
But it also doesn't matter why you did it. I know there's different theories on this, but I believe that you can't start to second guess someone's motivations, and I'm sure there's a different philosopher that says something different. But in the philosophy of my philosophy,
in my world,
I'm very much of the opinion that you can't start to second guess people's motivations. You can only look at their actions.
I think, but that's why I struggle with once you've gone beyond needing to earn a living, given where we started today, which was talking about technology in the workplace really, and what we do, and what have we even made this point, what moral obligations we have to do right and wrong, whatever the fuck right or wrong is. I do want to know what Alexander Nix's motivations were, because I can't understand why he did it, and I think that's my problem. So I think he's wrong, and I think what he was trying to achieve was wrong. So if somebody's doing something, why do I want to understand that? I don't know.
I don't think it's that complicated. I think he wants money / to impress his father or whatever it is, and he doesn't see the people. He doesn't see society as being a thing worth protecting. But also, I'm just thinking in terms of the workplace, these moral questions aren't everyday questions. They're kind of like something that you go, it's kind of something for me, it's at the start of the project when I choose to take it. It's like, hey, is it morally compatible with my values? Yes, but then I'm not going to be thinking every day, is this bug that I'm trying to fix morally compatible with my values? I'm just like trying to get on with it. So, and then that's where I guess there's an opportunity to sort of slide into the muck if you're not vigilant. But at the same time, I've been in the meeting with this particular client, and when they've started kind of like backpedaling on the social impact part of the project, that kind of was the thing that got me interested in it in the first place, I'm very vocal in, trying to prevent that from happening with as many arguments, just trying to sort of...
Yeah. So I have a friend who made a TV show about psychopaths for Horizon. You can, I no doubt, find it on the internet or on iPlayer or somewhere. But so she knows a lot. She knows a lot about psychopaths, and we happened to be talking about Katie Hopkins in the pub. There was is she a psychopath or not conversation, and one of the arguments against was that she... Well, I don't know where this story's going.
Trolling.
Does it matter?
She's a troll.
She's an arsehole.
Trolling is used... I'm just trolling you. I'm not being a psychopath. I'm not being an arsehole. I'm trolling you. Like, that's a very popular sort of like mindset at the moment with horrible people.
But why do you want to make other people unhappy?
Because I'm just trolling you because trolling...
It's a new verb.
It's a thing. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of upsetting stuff as a result of this idea that trolling is an activity.
It's true.
And it's not just being an arsehole. I'm being an arsehole. Doesn't sound quite as good, does it?
No.
I've spent a lot of time lamenting the hole that the removal of religion has left in society. The fact that now there is no moral authority that everybody has to go and prostrate themselves to every week, and I don't know, or every day, depending on what the faith is. There is now no longer any sort of socially mandated moral sort of accountability reference point training education that everyone sort of has to go to every Sunday or whatever. And that's even though that had become largely more preoccupied with its own survival than necessarily the well-being of its constituents, or what do you call it, parish, whoever people that are there, it still did perform that function. And I was just thinking this week, like, what if a state did try to make people, even if it was, you've got to watch this film, like, we're going to put this film on, everyone's got to come and watch this film because it makes some very good points about this moral thing, and we are, as the moral arbiters, we think this is the right thing to do. And I don't know how someone comes to be in that position that they're making moral decisions, but it's been something that's been part of human history up until very recently, is that we've decided, okay, a priest is someone who we go to as someone that knows more than we do about what we should do and what the right thing to do is. And that's just a yawning void there now.
Isn't morality programmed into society now via law?
That's not a way to do it, though. That's just like, you can't describe something by what it's not. And the law is, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this. Or maybe you've got to do this many times. You've got to do this amount of this. That just means people push into the boundaries rather than coalescing on the sort of wholesome centre.
But I had a very secular education with little or no religious elements. I read the story, a lot of Bible stories, but as stories, Noah's Ark, stuff like that. But we did philosophy at school. We talked about, and also my parent. I suppose this is missing the societal effect. But we did in school have this. We had sociology and philosophy, and part of the classroom conversations were about what's right and wrong, and it still needs to be part of your education. And what's right or wrong needs to be part of your education. It doesn't necessarily need to be delivered via church or Sunday school. It can be delivered via school.
But do you not think, it is a muscle that needs that.
Oh, totally. You need to be constantly reevaluating and learning and moving.
It's being reminded, just because it's so easy to sort of like, get sucked into your Facebook feed or whatever, and just the things that we're consuming don't have our best interests at heart, and nothing does really anymore.
But I also
unless you kind of gravitate to unless you find it and you feel like that's something that's missing. But a lot of people just probably don't want to be told what to do. Most people.
Yeah. What about this thing, the Sunday Assembly? Which is this...
Yeah, is that de Botton's one, or is that something else?
I don't read de Botton as much as you do. But I know this thing called the Sunday Assembly exists, which is a secular Sunday morning gathering.
And that's fine. And I think there's lots of scope for opt-in versions, but I sort of wonder if there shouldn't be something that's harder to opt out of for the people that probably need it a bit more.
But I mean,
I don't know.
One of the big topics at the moment is consent, for example. Sex education still very much centred around condoms and just mechanics of how you get pregnant, rather than what is consent, what does it mean, how do you have a conversation about these things, when is it, what's the difference between trying to be persuasive, like, oh, go on, versus ignoring somebody's wishes. These are all conversations that should be starting in the classroom.
But also, it is kind of a moving thing, and we're kind of constantly sort of learning and growing. And maybe this is probably the sort of PC outrage is partly coming from, well, how was I supposed to know? I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. Like, no one's kind of, once you're out of school, no one's really making much of an effort to kind of continue that education. So then it sort of comes as a shock, and it's like, I didn't know what I was...
I didn't know I couldn't say that. I didn't know I couldn't call them
Maybe you did suspect it, but... But maybe you didn't. Maybe you just thought it was, I just said, hello, darling. I was just giving her a compliment. What? If what I learnt at school was the pinnacle of my moral education, then I think it would be very far behind where we've learnt that
it's true.
Our circle of empathy needs to expand to now.
But I mean, what do people talk about in the pub if they're not talking about morality? That's what I want to know. I don't know.
I think they're talking about the football and they're talking about
football. So maybe
their aches and pains.
So maybe these other institutions need to be louder in talking about. I know that the British footballers are starting to wear like rainbow shoelaces, and they're having sort of anti-racist campaign's the right word. And then there's this whole thing about women's football and how that should get, so football, in the absence of the church being a constant in people's lives, then the things that are a constant, like EastEnders and EastEnders does attack some tricky topics, doesn't it? It gets people talking. I
think you're right. I think this stuff is happening all over the place. And it's, the football stadium is a church now, and the nightclub is a church. I think what's very interesting about a clubbing MDMA-style, ecstasy-style experience is that it exposes that empathy within, like brings it really to the surface and makes everyone sort of feel this love and sort of absolute magnified empathy. And there's no one's got to tell you. Like, it's in you all the time, and if people can improve their sense of empathy without even having to have someone explain it to them, then that's nice. But then I don't know. By the next Tuesday, then it's all kind of like, fuck that.
Then life's become really difficult. I mean, one of the reasons I really enjoy recording this podcast with you every Friday is because we have now created our own little church of two. Where on a Friday, we spend a couple of hours having a conversation about a topic. And that is a luxury I really don't have very often in my life. I've had a conversation about psychopaths and Katie Hopkins and how some of her comments aren't that far different from some of the things Frankie Boyle used to use as comedy a few years ago. He seems to have softened, but some of the things, you watch his stand-up, you're like, fuck, I can't believe he just said that. But so we had a conversation, and that was in a pub, and we're a particular type of set of people, and I'm recording a podcast, so it gives an opportunity to bring in, and I provoke it because my Facebook feed is full of shit like Katie.
Don't shy away from the political,
no,
do you?
So I'm an instigator of those kind of conversations. So
It's an exhausting conversation, though. That's why I think like you need to set aside some time to
Well,
do
yeah,
it every
it's timing.
week.
It's like makes you, like, all this thinking makes my head hurt.
I think largely the film industry is pretty good about trying to have positive morality in their stories.
I mean, we gave them credit for this the other day, didn't we?
But actually, they get attacked very hard, don't they, if they don't?
Oh, yeah.
You know, if Quentin Tarantino is going to make children get, you know, there's a game industry as well. Like these makers of commercial art are under a lot of scrutiny for the moral content of what they're doing. Unfortunately, by, you know, sometimes the people scrutinising them have a skewed view of, you know, outdated view of morality, if you ask me.
Yeah. Well, we've given them... well, they also get attacked if they do, whenever they bring in something that's considered a controversial subject. It's like, I listened to the World in Words podcast this week when I was in the park, which was talking about there's a children's book come out in Sweden that uses a gender-neutral pronoun in its story. So instead of saying the child protagonist is neither ever referred to as either male or female, they are referred to, even though they have a name, they're referred to in a gender neutral pronoun, which apparently is very new to the Swedish language. And when this book came out, obviously there were loads of controversy. What is this pronoun? It's something like hen instead of... So it's not it, because it implies an object, but something like that. And so so there was masses of outrage. What are they doing? Blah, 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 blah. And now, a few years later, it's kind of entered the language. It's been adopted.
Well, that's great. We need one. We need one of those. We need a gender-neutral pronoun. There's that book I'm reading, by the way, about storytelling. He's very heavy on the he and him as the protagonist. And I think a lot of people are reading this book. And he says, like, oh, I'm saying he because it's easier. I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's right. You're making all your protagonists, all your stories about men, all the way through. And that's, you know...
It is hard in the English language, in my opinion, to refer to somebody in with a gender-neutral pronoun. So what I tend to do is default to just always using their name, because it's much easier to say, I wonder what Alex thinks about this, rather than going what they, because they is plural in my head, and it just makes it hard. Like, you know, it kind of creates a little panic before I'm going to say something, because I don't know what the right way to say it is. But this is different. I think this is different to... It's different to morality because it's not about what's right or wrong. But it is related to morality, because as we make progress, because that's one of the things you did bring up, was that, is a society where gay marriage is wrong, has it simply not progressed enough, and therefore versus,
I suppose people's sort of resistance to that is, what next thing if you're making me empathise with women, next thing what? Dogs, trees, benches. Give me a break.
It's like, people are gonna make but this is also about not being able to make an argument. I don't know if we're very good at making an argument. I know we're very good at having a chat with each other, but I don't know if we're...
Well, this was the crux of Stuart's email, was that we weren't trying to, change anyone's mind. But I think we kind of admitted to that, and I've admitted to that on this podcast, that I don't even know where to start trying to change these people's minds. So we're just sort of venting it at this point, and maybe hopefully we will start to learn how to change people's minds as time goes on. But I absolutely, I have no idea how to trying to argue with like the alt-right and the people that will just want to flip every argument in this kind of really dishonest way to sort of find a sort of ostensibly opposite but equally valid sort of counterpoint, where actually they're just kind of being very dishonest and sort of like
because I also think that there's something different about arguing with somebody or having a conversation with somebody if it's just the two of you who disagrees massively versus in a public forum, because one of you is going to have to lose face But in a one-to-one situation, there's no face to be lost. Nobody's witnessing your change of mind or your weakness or your stupidity or ignorance. So, you know, I find, because I have this, a lot of the people that I went to school with in the former Yugoslavia share things on Facebook that make, I don't even know where to start. And I just, you know, I cannot possibly engage with a rational argument with them on Facebook. And I'd be very nervous about even approaching it one-to-one. But I feel like if I was one-to-one with them, I could do it in a respectful way. But I suppose which is what it's all about. It's all about respecting the other person's humanity, even if you don't respect their opinion, you know, or assuming at least that they're not going out of their way to be an arsehole, and that's just a thought process that they've stumbled down.
Well, so assuming they're not trolling, which is sometimes what that content is sometimes what those posts are, and then like. Yeah, good. They're like, but there's that sort of like, okay, you believe that and I believe this. Okay, let's start with some things that we can both agree on. So let's imagine you've agreed what's morally right and wrong, or you have a sense of that in your life, and now you need to go out and get people on side. How do you do that? Do you have to do that? Do I have to do that? Well, you can get like a loudhailer and stand in a public place going, sinners are winners, sinners are winners. No, wait a minute. Do you want to be a sinner or a winner? See, it doesn't even work, the rhyme. It could be used for either meaning. You're a sinner or a winner. That doesn't work. You have to have something compelling that draws people into it, like a big Hollywood film with a theme and a moral. I think that's how you communicate it. You need to, that's, the church is attractive in a pre-laser light show era because it's got these coloured lights and a huge organ, and like it's an absolute spectacle that attracts people. And so the things that now attract people have to take moral responsibility. And that's probably why the Cambridge Analytica evil Facebook manipulation campaigns is, this is a compelling thing that you're using in a way that we don't think is allowed. If we knew that that was what was happening, we would engage all of our fury at the media for having an immoral opinion or presenting something that we believe is immoral, but because it's slipped under that radar while still kind of having that attractiveness. So
there's morality and then there's moral responsibility. So you can, at the very least, what you can do is be morally responsible for the things that you believe are right and wrong.
And I think if everyone did that, then I think we'd be all right.
Yeah.
And then but then we do have this sort of ongoing education and improvement and like working out that muscle of, the parables and all those stories that we kind of might need to be reminded of. And even just the mechanism, the process of praying is an implicitly, like most people when they pray, they're praying for their family, they're thinking about someone else as part of their daily routine.
Yeah.
And which is not something that, like, it's probably why meditation is sort of like, is kind of trying to fill that gap. But
it's true. Yeah, I mean, there's lots to be said for the ritual of going to church every Sunday. Not least of which is the community, the meditation, because that's a lot of the spectacle, all of those, the music, the
kind of. I used to love that Christian music, even into my teens. I used to love that shit. Like, when there was some clapping, or when there was like some, sometimes they'd have like a drum, you'd actually get a band playing and everyone would be singing. I flipping loved that. That was crack to me when I was younger. Seriously, I'm not that, because that's a beautiful communal experience, and I just, for me it's like, bring up the production values of that, and I'm on there. You're bringing together something I know is morally right, and I'm going to go to heaven, and it kind of sounds good now as well. This is amazing,
I feel similarly. I'm not a massive football fan, but I do occasionally go to a football stadium. And I love that feeling of shared joy. But it's brilliant.
It's something I very rarely get anymore, ever. Maybe I should just get into football.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of shouting and not winning. at least in church on Sunday, at some point there's gonna be that winning, joyful bit, even if there's a berating bit somewhere on the way.
And loads of boring stuff and deliberately uncomfortable benches to sit on.
Stand up, sit down, kneel. Stand up, sit down, kneel. I have been to church.
Have some wine. Have a little bit of drugs.
Keep you going.
I feel like there should be way more to say on this, and I'm a bit kind of freaked out that we seem to be at the bottom of our respective barrels so quickly.
Yeah, but
we agree, don't we?
And that's actually, it makes it quite difficult.
So I suppose this is like, here's our position more or less, and then next week we might have some people to argue with.
Yeah, maybe. And also, I think that what we perhaps, one of the things I struggle with is when you're talking about the sort of extremes of right or wrong, and should you join in with a project that sounds a bit shady tech-wise, but maybe you'll help sway it to the right side. Yeah, I just keep going back to the Holocaust. It's like, but Holocaust, and it's like there's I saw this again when I went down the Twitter rabbit hole this morning. One of the women has got in a Twitter header image, there's a picture of all these people Zig Heiling, and one guy just sitting there with his arms crossed, which is quite a famous picture, and she's got it circled, and it says, be this guy. And it is that sort of like, no, I just don't think you can join in with shady activities.
Yeah, how do you stand up for morals when you're on your own?
It's very hard.
Should we try and end by thinking about that question? It just takes, you've just got to be... I love that line in Captain America.
Which line are you in your... Go on.
You've got to... What does he say? Captain America. The requirement is that we stand up for what we believe, no matter the odds or the consequences. When the mob and the press and the whole world tell you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and tell the whole world, no, you move.
It is great. Except in your world, there's no river of truth.
Well, no, I mean, there's no. It's inductive, but you can't. Science doesn't know true. Sorry, that's just not true.
Why
it's
does
a
the
hard
word
thing
exist?
to realise.
Why does the word exist?
Because it's something that humans are very fixated on, and it brings us a lot of peace to feel like we know the truth, and it's very important to us, and that's why that's why religion is in a position to say this is the truth, whereas science just ethically cannot say that.
I need to think about your truth. I might go and do some reading about truth and then come back to you, because I don't know.
Yeah, well, start from the problem of induction, and then
IND. Just writing it down.
Like a heater. The problem of induction heaters.
Yeah. What I was going to say was something... in one of our many episodes, I've definitely used this example before, is that... Because I think that's part of what we need to help us with these things like the media argument and talking about morality, is that book, The Life You Can Save, and at the beginning of it, the example, which is you're walking to work and you see a child drowning in a puddle. What do? You go and rescue the child. You are wearing your very best shoes that cost you $400, and you see a child drowning in a puddle. What do? Jump in the puddle, save the child. You are on your way to a job interview, and it just keeps building the argument. And the answer is, and it's a known example used in a book that was used in an ethics class at a university in America land. That there's this sort of having those scenarios that help you expand on what's right or wrong, or add complexity to it, which I think you can use exactly that same scenario when you're talking about the morality of austerity and cutting the welfare state. It's the same thing. You are still walking past by cutting social care or reducing child benefit to only 2 children. You are walking past a third child who's drowning in a pond or in a puddle, and it's that kind of like And I think when you are discussing with somebody, okay, the word truth is difficult or contentious or whatever. I need to. But
you need an empathic story. You need that's a parable. Right,
yeah.
and that's what religion does, and I was just thinking, like in the House of Commons, you rarely see someone come out with a parable, but maybe they should have been more.
Maybe that's where, when you've got better at your stories, when you've finished reading your How to Write Stories book, maybe we can work on some stories that help us make our arguments for things that we think are right or wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's how you have to do it. You have to kind of you persuade people by giving them, showing them in the form of a story is probably the most powerful technique we have for sort of moral, because it like keys into people's inner morality, and then you can immediately spot a nix because you tell him the story of the Good Samaritan or something, and he's just like, I don't understand. Right? And then that's your psychopath test.
You could argue, and this is where ethics and morality, I think, is interesting in a work context. You could argue that simply encouraging people to buy more shit that they don't need is not morally sound. And most of usability is about improving the checkout process and finding opportunities to upsell.
You're a monster.
A monster. But there's a lot of it, like getting the click-through rates and getting the sign-up rates and it's just, you're always being motivated by a business. And then the question is choosing the business. So if you're increasing sign-ups to social care or making it easier, making a form that helps you get the carers allowance, making that easier, helping government to spend less money, making that that kind of stuff, you're still using patterns that then in a commercial environment, because even selling infinite keep cups is still selling a bunch of shit that is just filling landfill.
Nerd writer just did a YouTube video I watched this morning called Dark Patterns. So if anyone's not really from the sort of usability sphere, there's actually quite a clear, well put together video about some of these, like how difficult it is to find Amazon's close account button. There isn't one, is the answer. Like, you've got to really dig and really click on some counterintuitive things before you can close your Amazon account.
But there's a guy in Brighton I used to work with called Harry Brignall, and he has a website called Dark Patterns.
He might be the same. He's probably the guy that this guy was talking about.
But that's quite an interesting site, because it's all that sort of using interaction design to manipulate people. It's not it's not necessarily any better than what Cambridge Analytica are doing. It's just not done on such an insidious grand scale, not necessarily used to change a outcome of an election. But
you still more or less know what you're looking at least, that you're looking at something that's trying to sell you something most of the time, which was the fundamental problem with Cambridge Analytica, which was you didn't realise that you were looking at something that was being used to do that.
I mean, totally. You had no idea that you were in your own,
or what it knew about you.
And also, those dark patterns tend to be general for people in general. They're generalised dark patterns, except things like the EasyJet example, where they increase the fare as you're looking at it, so that you kind of get a panic on that the price of the flight's going to go up. So sort of artificial stick a tenner on that day that they seem to be looking at, so that to help close the deal. But hopefully that's quite known now. I don't know.
At least you got a chance to sort of spot it. It's not invisible.
No. So there's loads of unethical tech stuff. I mean, you could argue all this putting together bloody... Well, the thing about even Facebook, and because also I was listening to I think us talking a draft podcast or something, and I seem to use social media instead of and social network a bit interchangeably, because they've evolved over time. But they all started out as social networks, but they certainly didn't pass any sort of ethics committee as they set out, because they were just like, well, we're going to build this thing because we can. And I think because we can is one of the most dangerous and one of the most risky approaches to any project or using any technology. It's like,
I don't think it's because we can. I think it's because we think people want it.
But I think that's not. I mean, people want lots of things that aren't necessarily going to be any value to humanity.
Yeah. So people might want something, but they probably what they need is different. Is always
and that's like or what humanity needs. People might want bigger cars with bigger engines that guzzle more gas because they like driving fast, but actually humanity does not need those, so please stop making them.
But no one could have predicted, the idea that Facebook's kind of what they preach, what they say is you're going to be connected to everyone, and that's going to be a beautiful thing. And who could have realised that? Who would have known in advance the behaviour of that? Not that I'm defending Zuckerberg on his dragging his feet on stuff that they knew and then didn't act on until they were, in the spotlight in the sites.
I grant you that, but did anyone even stop? Where's the process? Where's the spot in the project planning, in the inventing, where you all put your black hats on and go, right, what is the flip side of this? Maybe there just needs to be a spot in a project development plan where the whole team pauses for a moment, goes to church and says, are we doing the right thing? Is this what we're supposed to be doing? And I think that's the bit that's not programmed into our work lives.
And I think to add to our growing list of grand podcast software projects, I'm sort of still on all of the recruitment lists, and I'm getting the calls and I'm getting this stuff, but I haven't seen anyone go for that, social morality, we want to do a project that actually has some social value. And if we had a kind of work, maybe if I Google, I can find something that does that and just kind of funnel all recruitment through that. But I think there's an opportunity there for just if you kind of opt in at the start that this is something that's important to you, and then we help each other once we have our niche, don't we?
Totally. And I think though, if we think back through our podcast, what we've been learning over time is also that donut economics is not a bad mechanism to use for the we doing the right thing, because it covers the positive impact on society, and I think really if we want to save the world, that's what we're going to have to do.
If there was one conclusion and one, I don't know, morality isn't necessarily always a question of knowing right from wrong. It's more about more regularly thinking about the question, thinking about it in relation, just remembering to think about morality is more is the thing that's missing a lot of the time. If we can just do that and be a bit more conscious about that, but then that doesn't help us fix the problems caused. It's the people that aren't doing that are the problem.
But if everybody who worked at, if we accept that Alexander Nix is a psychopath, has he employed 50 psychopaths?
That was something from last week that I kind of started saying, look, I said stuff doesn't happen on its own. There's a load of people working on it. So what needs to happen? If half of your team is asking moral questions, if you're designers, if you're content creators, if the people kind of writing the tech, if they are holding you to account, then you have no power. And so people, and it sort of comes back to that, don't be so scared for your job that you sacrifice, your ethics. And if we could, if we could protect people, and there are protections.
Unions, they're called.
Well, shit, I just invented unions. But it is something we are missing, isn't it? Totally. People don't feel. Imagine if there was unions and people felt a bit more, they had a bit more leverage if they argued against some of the insidious. Because there's probably very few Alexander Nix level psychopaths that are really good at editing videos in Final Cut, or writing, a schemaless database infrastructure. If people, and that's what we're seeing happening. We're seeing these whistleblowers coming out and saying stuff, and the same with women in the workplace. Writing these, coming out about Uber. It becomes very hard to have an institutionalized amorality if a lot of the individuals that make up that institution are vocally calling it out for what it's doing.
So be Captain America. Stand by the river of truth. with your feet firmly
say-
planted.
No, you move.
Done. I think we're done.
All right, fuck it. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you like the podcast, you can find us at grandpodcast.com, or you can email us hello@grandpodcast.com, or probably ideally tweet us, although Ivanka's a lot more on the Twitter than I am. It's not in my life that much. Where can we find you?
You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter, and also on @podcastgrand and at ivanka.blog.
And you can find my stuff, michaelforrestmusic.com. And what can people do to help us out?
They can tell their friends about our brilliant podcast.
And they can go into their phone, search for it for them,
and hit the subscribe button.
Yeah, on their account. Just go and just get people's phones off them, subscribe.
That's what I do. It's the best way is just to simply subscribe them and tell them what a podcast is, and suggest some times when they might like to listen to it.
Yeah, really kind of make it as easy as possible for them.
And even if you don't like it, there's no reason to deprive your friend of it.
Exactly. Your friend might like it. If you might hate our guts, but maybe you know a sinner. Maybe you know an evil person that you think, might get something out of it, and you don't mind them going to hell. On the podcast app, you can also give us some reviews. Please give us some reviews.
Yeah, reviews are useful.
I saw a review where they were like, I love listening to Ivanka. Took me a bit longer to warm up to Michael.
Where was that? They probably someone who knows
Podcasts. Apple Podcasts. I'm like, whatever. I'm just definitely not going to fixate on that forever.
Oh.
All right, thanks for listening still. Yes. And I mean, this, I guess, was a particularly chronic. We sort of pretty much agree. So where's the conflict? Where's the engagement? You be our engagement. You give us some questions. Thanks to Stuart and Warren for sending us questions.
Yes, thank you.
And bye. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.